Anything, anyone? No. We're visible there, okay, fine. So I want us to talk a bit about Chanukah, a little bit about Chazal look at Chanukah. There's a lot written about Chanukah. It's not one of those Moedim that has very little written about because it's not really in competition with anything else going on at the same time, and it's not around Bein Azmanim. So it gets historically it gets a lot of coverage. So I think there's a number of very interesting ha'aras. Obviously, the very simple model of the Ikar is Lahodas Halal because we were in trouble and were saved, which is true. That is a chiyuv to do such things. Would be a kavir l'doros of one day. So that's usually what you do on such scenarios. And this Chazal were masaking much broader, an 8-day moed. So that's one thing. Okay, but even then you could say 8 days. Why? Because the nace of the ner lasted 8 days or something like that. And that's how Chazal were masaking it. Chazal can make takonas. That's part of what their jurisdiction is. But they themselves, throughout, especially in the Midrash Agoda and the Midrashim on Torah, for example, see many, many remozim and links to Chanukah in the Torah itself. Right? In other words, it's not in the eyes of Chazal a big national scenario of we were in trouble and we got saved, and that's the ikar of the story. And there's an ace. That's not, there's much more, that's true, but there's something much more fundamental, much more primal. And it manifests in many, many different forms. I'll just tell you, we know there's a concept called Golos Yavon, and Golos Yavon is part of the 4 exiles that are seen in Sefer Daniel, for the 4 Golios as seen in the expressions of the Bris Bein Absarim, and in the Medrash Rabbah, the 4 exiles that are seen in the first day of creation. Right, that we say that so that the Medrash Rabbah, if you read Beis Rabbah, there's many, many manifestations of these 4 phases of darkness. What's Toyu, what's Voyu, what's Choshech, what's the time, what's the Ruach Elikim, the Machshava, the Spirit of God that's hovering, and what is the Yom Elikim Hiyar. But that pattern, the Medrash gives many, many, many instantiations of it, and when a Medrash does that, what it's telling you usually is that there's a fundamental pattern here. There's multiple expression, and that means it's primal. And as well known that something's in the beginning, the closer it is the beginning, the more fundamental and primal it is. And then the greatest structural manifestation of that is the 4 Golios, the 4 exiles of Yisrael. Toyu is Babel, Voyu is Paras Modai, Choshech is Yavon, Shech Shichanem Shel Yisrael, they darken the eyes of Israel. They made the Kisur Hamakar Nashar right on the horn of an ox, Ein on the Chelik Velekei Yisrael, right, that we don't have a portion of the God of Israel, about which many, many Torahs have been said. And finally, the great Tahoim, the great abyss, is Edom. Right? It's Rome, which morphs into Western civilization, and that's our goddess. Ruach Elikim Rachapis up in our mind, the Spirit of God is Mashiach, and Yom Elikim Hiyar is Olam Haba. That's the basic pattern. And what that indicates for us, therefore, is that whilst it may raise questions as to why Yavon is called Choshech, what was the nature of this writing on the horn of an ox, what's the horn, what's the nusach, etc. One thing it definitely tells us is the story with Yavon was something that was embedded into the fabric of creation that we had to at some point encounter. That's point number 1. In other words, it's not an incidental element that we happened to get in trouble, like there were many, many stories in Klal Yisrael's history where we were in trouble and we were kover a day afterwards for the nace that we were saved. Purim Kottons all over the place. It's not a Purim Kotton, it's more fundamental because there was an embedded part of the fabric of Ma'aser Bereishis that at some point you're going to have to encounter this thing called Choshech. Just as a side issue, that raises lots of questions. Every time you learn this, you have to think of the same question. So what if Adam Rishon had not done the chait? Or what if Avraham Avinu had not said B'moed Akir Hashana? Or what if Shlomo Melech or Chizkiyahu had been Mashiach? Then what would have happened to Golos Yavon? So the teretz is like this, is that then they would have had to deal with the choshech of this problem there and then. In other words, what blocked Avraham Avinu, what blocked Adam Rishon from lasting was a power that included the Toyu, the Voyu, the choshech, and the Bnei Toim. Right? At its root, that was what was pulling him out. And he would have had to withstand all 4 to get to the Hiyar at the end. Right? Same with Avraham Avinu. The fact that Avraham doesn't answer by Ma'edah, right? In fact, he asked by Ma'edah, as the Maharal says, is not a chait in he didn't do anything wrong, he doesn't get punished for it, but he was at a point where he could try to fight all of them at their shoresh, Okay, he didn't get all the way, got 99% of the way. Now we have to still experience them all in manifestation. That's what the Bris Bein Sorim told him, and so on. Right? For Shlomo Melech to close the gap, for Chizkiyahu to close the gap, all four would have had to have been crossed. So, okay, one way or the other, that's the story. The Choshech has to be encountered. The second interesting thing is that because there's a tighter relation, Toyu is an independent thing, there's a chaos. Voyu, there's emptiness, that's the second independent state. Choshech is al panei tahom. And therefore, even when you've conquered Choshech, it still remains. It remains as part of the tahom, right? The abyss. And that means that the Golus Yovan, although it's in a way we've got through it and we're ready for the tahom, it remains linked. And of course, it does historically. So whatever we encountered with Yovan, we've still got to deal with along the rest of history, which means that Chanukah now has an extra element to it, that somehow the Nisayon against the darkness of Chanukah and the success is giving us clues as to how we succeed against the final long Golus that we're going to go into. And of course, historically, they more or less caused one another, right? The Hashmonaim had very little respite and very quickly brought the Romans in into the whole story anyway. The third thing is that, of course, the tikkun of Choshech is Or. And that's obviously why you can have a nace with light, but also the Or in the Pasuk is Olam Haba. So once again, the Machshava against Choshech and the success of Chanukah is setting us up for the structure of what is needed in the long Machshava of the goddess of the great Tahom that includes Choshech and the Or at the end. That's just things just to put him into perspective. There is a fascinating Ateres Kenim, it's a Pirush on the side of the Shulchan Aruch, that quotes a medrash. I've never seen this medrash quoted anywhere else. As far as I know, we definitely don't have this medrash. Now you can do the searches. You don't need to be a great Talmid Chacham to know this medrash doesn't seem to exist. But I have asked real big Talmid Chacham, and nobody's seen this medrash except in that Ateres Kenim, which doesn't mean it isn't there. It just means we don't have it. Many midrashim we've lost. There's Yodua that Chazal tell us that the Asid Lavoy, right? So you see it in Megillah, you see it in Megillas Esther, that it's lo yavar, it won't go. So also see it in a moedos libotel, see it in all the Sifrei Tanakh. The moedos will go and they'll remain Chanukah, so they'll remain Purim and Yom Kippur. That's kind of what they talk about. The lo yavar in Megillas Esther is referring both to the Megillah and to the Yom Tov itself. The Yemei Purim Eila, they're not going to ever go. And they're part of what Olam Haba will be comprised of. Now, Teres Kenim quotes Chanukah as well. So, okay, take it, not take it, just telling you there's such a thing out there. Either way, even without that Teres Kenim, it's clearly got something that's going to have long-term import through history. If you want to be a bit less abstract and less just thinking Kipshuto, remember, Yovan has never left us. We are very, very much in Greek civilization, Greek culture, Adayim Hazeh. So that's true of the Islamic world, it's true of the Christian Europe. So it's certainly on a poshet level very much dominates us. Now, let's get therefore into our relationship with Yovan and what the meaning of Choshech is. Let's try and understand this. There's a Zohar Kodesh that's quoted a lot that talks about in Yechezkel, the Navi Yechezkel, right at the very, very beginning, more or less I think the fourth pasuk of Yechezkel. So if just I'll zip ahead and find Yechezkel here. Right at the very beginning of the first parak, the Navi says the following pasuk. I saw there's this big storm wind coming from the north on God there's this great fire and there's a noiga, there's some kind of shine around it. So there's a very powerful koyach and a shine. Okay, this is part of the Ma'aser Merkava. So what is this noiga saviv? So they quote the Zohar Kodesh as saying that's Malchus Yovan. Now, we're talking about Ma'aser Merkava, at least the build up to the part that gets to the Ein Darshan. So we don't need to understand everything that's going on over here. But the fact that on whatever level it means, the noiga, this kind of shining glow light is Yovan, tells you that you can't expect Yovan to be such a dark place. Now, more pashut than that in halacha is the Gemara Megillah. In the Chasam Megillah we learn the halacha that a Sefer Torah cannot be written in any lashon. Right? Can't write in any language. What does it mean you can't write a Sefer Torah in any language? Why can't you write a Sefer Torah in English or French or Russian? Right? Torah is very simple because Torah has to be contained in Lashon HaKodesh. Why does it have to be contained in Lashon HaKodesh? Because only Lashon HaKodesh can carry Torah. Torah is not about a unit of information, a bit of simple information, which could be translated into another language. It has layers and layers of depth and meaning and things. And a Lashon, a language, always carries a culture. It carries a cultural worldview, and no cultural worldview is big enough or deep enough to contain Torah, except for Lashon HaKodesh, except as the Gemara for Yavon. You can write the Torah in Yavonis. So you see from why the Gemara in Daf Tes says, why can you write in Yavonis? Because there's a special school, there's something about the language and culture of Yavon as the heirs of Yefes that has a sufficient beauty that brought into the Ahalei Shem, into the tents of Shem, it can do beautiful things. Beauty is expression. The language is an expressive tool, and somehow it's sufficiently capable of capturing Torah. As many other remozim to the link between Rashi and Megillah says that the Yaf that the Yaf is expressed in Dafke Lashon Yavonis. But the point is that there's many other remozim to this. The fact that Sion is tzaddik at the core, but Yavon, the other Isias spell Yavon. The fact that Yoinasi Tamasi in Shir Shirim, that Yoina is referred to in Chazal both as Yisrael, as the Yoina, but it's also Lashon Yavon. So there's many remozim to this very deep relationship between this Noiga, this shining sort of thing around the core of the Gilei Hashem in the world, implying that there is a natural place of chibur between Yavon and Yisrael, to the point where Yavon can express the core of the tzidkas of Yisrael. And that makes it hard to see why they would be the obvious candidates. A Noiga to be choshech. How's a glow of light? How's a Lashon that's so beautiful that it can capture Torah and its culture so dark? This is the question we need to ask. Now, so let's take a look a little bit, because one of the interesting things you'll note, a lot of Mefarshim do and Chazal do it, is they seem to believe that the tracking of the Sedras of the year maps the year itself. Raised an interesting problem because it wasn't muchach that the Torah itself has to track the year, right? The minhagim saw to do that, but it certainly seems to be very ancient. We know there were two basic minhagim for the read Kriyas Torah throughout history. There was the minhag Bavel, which was to do exactly what we do, split the Torah into 54 parashios and work them out so they can always be read in an annual cycle. Sometimes they would finish around Rosh Hashanah, sometimes somewhere between Rosh Hashanah and Shmini Atzeres they would do Messiah, or just after Rosh Hashanah, some of it in that Tkufa the Messiah, and more the minhag already, the Gemara seems to quote the possibility of the Siyam being as we do it, and we now do the Siyam on Simchas Torah, on second day Shmini Atzeres in Galus. Minhag Eretz Yisrael was the same, but it divided the Torah into even more. Every Seder was split into three, and you have still some midrashim that do this, and it was read in a 3-year cycle. Some of they were different, whether they had the fixed point in the year to finish or not. But either way, the long-term preference and the Bavliim's preference to read it in a year seems to be, amongst other things, often taken to assume that the themes of the Torah in its cycle is parallel to the theme of a year in its cycle. And therefore, Bereshit should begin Dafka where it begins, and then things should be where they are. And usually themes that are emerging in the Torah will parallel themes that are emerging in the year. Certainly you see the amount of remozim that Chazal bring to Chanukah in the Sedra, starting from Vayishlach and Vayeshev and Miketz and Vayigash. These are very, very full of Chanukah remozim, right? So maybe we'll pick up on one or two. But therefore, the entire story of Mechiras Yosef has a very deep link. The Megala Mukha says famously that in Vayeshev, that the entire story of Golus Yavon and the Tikkun of Chanukah was somehow Tikkun of Mechiras Yosef. But if you just look, for example, in the Navi and Zechariah, and again, just see if I'll bring it up over here. The Navi and Zechariah Paraktas says like this: Ki dorachti li Yehuda keshes. I'm going to pull back a bow, Yehuda as a bow. Right? Remember, Yehuda is the one who says that we should sell Yosef. Milesi Ephraim, and I fill the bow with Ephraim. Ephraim is Yosef. I take the bow of Yehuda, I fill it with an arrow of Ephraim. I will awaken your children Tzion, right, which is Tzaddik and Yavam. Let's say, okay, Tzaddik is actually Tzaddik, just by the way, but the drosh that made on this. But I'll awaken your children Tzion. I'll bonayich Yavam, against your children Yavam. V'samtich gecherev gibar. So it's the chibur of Yehuda and Yosef, the Yehuda and Ephraim, that is a weapon that can be used to get rid of Yavam, which implies that it can't be a coincidence that the breakdown of Yehuda and Yosef is coming always at the time of the year of the same of when we're reading about Golus Yavam. And if you think about it on a very posh level, again, sometimes these things are abstract up there. Let's make them very posh. Is Golus Yavam was an internal Golus. It was a very strange Golus. Of the 4 Goliaths, 4 exiles of us, it's the only one that took place in Eretz Yisrael. Bavel, we were taken out of Eretz Yisrael. Persian Media, Paras and Modai, we were out of Eretz Yisrael. Edom threw us out of Eretz Yisrael. It was the only one where throughout the entire Maisa there's a Beis HaMikdash. It's not clear. That's in the most contemporaneous sources we have. Okay, they're not Kodesh sources, but whatever reliability, Sefer Maccabeim, which we don't even have the original Lashon HaKodesh. We only got, you can tell it was originally written in Lashon HaKodesh. We only have the translation back from the Greek. But you see from the story, it's difficult to tell sometimes who the Melech who's doing the oppression is. Is it was all being controlled by Antiochus up in Syria, or was it how much was being done by the local Jewish vassal king who was making these decrees? It's not clear. Either way, the Greeks are going to enforce it because rebels can't rebel against any of their vassals either. But certainly it seems there was a huge amount of the Misyavnim in control of stuff. So you got a bit of a civil war. The military conflict involved serious Syrian Greek garrisons, a real major battles. So, it doesn't undermine. But the conflict itself, the attack on Torah itself, that's Malchus Yavon Shah, how much was the central government and how much was the delegated Misyavnim is not clear. Not clear. But it certainly seems to be a serious element of civil war, a breakdown within Yisrael. Yavon comes along on the scene and Yisrael breaks down. Yisrael starts to break into factions. Those who want to be closer to Yavon, those who want to be further away from Yavon. So unlike the others, in Bavel there's a clear brute force. In Paras Hamadai, brute force. In Edom, brute force. In Yavon, the real problem began without brute force. It began as a breakdown within Yisrael. That first breakdown within Yisrael is Yehuda and Yosef. So it's not an unlikely linkage that internal civil war, is going to be a reflection. Understanding the amkus of the brothers in Yosef issue can help us to understand some of the Yavon story. So let's take a look a little bit at. And you see this, by the way. You see that the battle between Yehuda and Yosef is not one-off. It's not one-off. We see from the Novi Zechariah that it's not one-off, right? But you see. If you look very carefully, you'll notice that actually all the way through the Navi, we've got this big issue. If you look at Sefer Shoftim begins with the Shvatim are not sure who should go first against Canaan, Yehuda goes first. But then the story of Shoftim moves to Hari Ephraim. Shiloh was in Hari Ephraim. It was the Kohanim who were in the world of Yosef. And that became the center we saw. Almost all the Shoftim are actually sitting in Hari Ephraim. When Shaul HaMelech's chosen, he's chosen from the Bnei Rochel, right? He's chosen from Binyamin. And the Bnei Yehuda struggle to accept it, and that becomes David. But you look very carefully through Sefer Shmuel, you will see how much effort, we're not going to share in Tanakh now, how much effort David HaMelech makes to preserve the Bnei Rochel. First, he makes sure he preserves the lineage of Shaul HaMelech and tries to keep very close, marries into them, and always tries to keep them alive. He makes sure there's two Kohanim, right? One is the lineage of Aaron, who would have been operating presumably in Yehuda, and one is Tzaddik and Avyasa. One is Avyasa came ultimately from back to Shiloh, right? So by a Nolev. So you're going to have. He's holding these two Kohanim there. He's holding his sword together as the Bnei Rochel and the Bnei Leah. This is a big issue, and obviously when the Malchus splits, and it's Achia HaShiloini, right? Shlomo Melech removes the Shiloh Kohen, and Achia HaShiloini is the one who gives the nevuah and says that the kingdom is going to be lost, and Rechavam, it gets taken away by Yerovam ben Nevat, who's from Yosef. So this is always going to be, the schism is a natural fault line to the Bnei Rochel and Yehuda. This is the way things work. And the leadership of the north is always under the Bnei Rochel. So it's a long-term schism in Yisrael. It's a repeated schism in Yisrael. The Navi sees it in Yechezkel and Zechariah in many cases that we've got to get Ephraim and Yehuda back together again, and then we can make Yisrael work. Even after they've gone into Golus, the Bnei Ephraim, we've still got to work on these together. Binyamin remains with us, right? So this is a big primal issue. Much to say about it, but I want to get into therefore what was Mechiras Yosef, right? What's Mechiras Yosef? What's this issue? It's a big sugya, but let's just try and bring out one dimension of it. So we know that the most common feature of Yosef mentioned, there's two actually. One is his chen and two is his yofi. Sheka chen v'hevel yofi. But if you look in last week's Sadra, how often everything he does is chen. He's an Ishmat Tzliach, but he finds chen here, chen there, chen everywhere. And he's described as Yifei Toya, Yifei Mara. There's no other man in Tanakh who's described like that. Right? There's beauty, there's chen. And I mean, Rashi brings it actually, the Medrash in with Eshes Potiphar, that he was busy used to look after his hair and his shoes, and there's a question of how much criticism there is in that, question of fathers and Avedas, etc., etc. But if you look, for example, right at the end of Parashat Vayechi, just want to read the pasuk in Vayechi, like this. Ben Poros Yosef, Ben Poros Ale Ayin Benois Tzad Ale Shor. So Rashi explains that pasuk means that Ben Poros means a child of chen, of charm, right? That Ale Ayin Benois Tzad, what's going on over there? That the child of beauty is spread, Ale Ayin, spread over the eyes, and as everybody's looking at Yosef. And Benois Tzad Ale Shor means the Benois Mitzrayim would jump up on walls every time he walked anywhere. There's something about the beauty of Yosef. And it's not difficult to see that this effect on people of charm, of chen, of yofi, is dangerous. That's shekachein v'avala yofi. But it's more than dangerous. When you have the ability that everything you do, consciously and not, is impacting others to love you, right? Then it doesn't matter how well motivated you are. There's a huge danger of narcissism there, huge danger of self-worship, a huge danger of manipulation, and a huge danger of what is effectively an avodah zarah. And this is the Medrash Rabbi that says, "Vayar oisay merachik." They said, "Hine bala chaloim es ba." Bala chaloim es ba. Just say, "Hine choilem ba." The dreamer comes. What's bala chaloim es? So the Medrash picks up a subconscious reference to the Baalim. This one's going to take us to the Baalim. This one is dangerous. And sure enough, what do we find in history? That the great schism of Yisrael I just described, where the Malchus, the United Malchus breaks up, is Yerovam ben Nevat, who could in theory have been the great tzaddik. And even when Yerovam ben Nevat begins to go, right, he divides the Malchus and he takes away the northern Malchus, what's the first thing he does? He builds Egel Azov. Right? Yosef is a shor, is the ox. And he goes and builds these Yosefs, basically. These Egels, he goes and builds golden calves. And in fact, later on, Chazal say that he was, Chazar B'cha, you could come back. Kodesh Baruch Hu says, you, Ben Yishai, and me will be Matayal. We'll walk together. What does it say? Mi Barosh. Who, for me, this is service of me. I don't want to just be in Gan Eden with you and Ben Yishai and Rechavam. If I'm not interested. So this issue that the Shar of Yosef, right? The Yosef who's a Shar and described also in Hosea as an Egel. This Shar and Egel of Yosef is it becomes an Egel, it becomes Avodah Zarah, it becomes the two Egel Azavs that are built instead, and of course even the first Egel. How's the first Egel built according to the Tanchuma? They put in a slate of Ale Shar, come up ox. Who's that slate for? Yosef. Moshe Rabbeinu had this slate right at the end of Parashat Vayechi, Pakoy Yifkoy Hashem Eschem, Va'alisa Masasmi, you'll raise my bones. Chazal tell us there was a slate with those words, Ale Shar, arise ox. You put it in, and Atmas Yosef come up, the bones of Yosef, it brings Yosef up. Aaron takes a slate, they put it in the fire, and an Egel Azov comes up. In other words, the brothers felt the idolatrous power of Yosef. Somewhere built in Yosef is an extreme danger of narcissism, of self-worship, of manipulation, and of ultimately idol worship. It's all really the same thing. Idolatry is always self-worship in a projected form. So they feel it. The Baal HaChalom Espah, this can take us to Baalim. There's a power within this that's incredibly dangerous for Yisrael to have. We don't want this. Just imagine if we could just get rid of Yosef. And they feel it in the attraction to foreign cultures, right? The zealousness to connect with and charm and find favor with everybody is going to lead us to all the way down to Yavan. To the point where Yosef is Gematria Antiochus. I think it's B'nai Yissaschar says that one. I forget it. I think it's there. Right? In other words, Yosef is this exact issue, right? Yosef can be Yavan. Yavan's also beauty. Yavan's also form. Yavan's also all this stuff. So effectively, they're trying to prevent Golus Yavan. They're trying to prevent the schism of Klal Yisrael. They're trying to prevent all these terrible things. The Egel Azav, the second Egels, the Golus Yavan, everything. It's all coming through this koyach called Yosef. This desire to charm the world out there. That's what's going on over here. Now, and of course it leads to Golus Edom. There's Gemara in Shabbos tells us that the day Yerovam placed those Egels in Beis and Dan, so that was the beginning of Italia Shel Yavan. Italia presumably became Golus Edom and so on. There's many other Ramazim. But think about Kisvalacham, what do they say to them? They darken eyes and they say, Kisvalacham Akaran Ashar, right on the horn of an ox. And Already many Mefarshim will point this out to you. The horn of the ox is Yosef. They're saying, come on, we can be, you have a Yosef element too like us, right? So, okay, so let's try. So that would all justify, be matchstick the brothers, except that we know they got it wrong. We know Lemaisa in Torah Yosef is mutstak. Lemaisa in Torah Yosef is the one who's matzliach. Lemaisa, all his chalomas come true. The Baal chalomas, they're MS. Lemaisa, not only does he get it right in Torah and the brothers get it wrong in Torah, but the Gemara Baba Basra says, I'm going to cut it a little short time, but it's in Daf Kuf Chof Gimel. Baba Basra says as follows. So basically, okay, I'll share outside, is that in the end, Golus Edom can't be destroyed without the Bnei Yosef. A line that we hear later on of concept of Mashiach ben Yosef, but there can't be a tikkun to the Golus without Yosef. So not only do they get it wrong once, they get it wrong permanently, right? And Adarabah, right? What they create is a near catastrophe, a near catastrophic thing getting rid of it. You know, Yosef is indispensable. We see it in the end of Pash Vayishlach, in the beginning of Pash Vayishlach, and the end of Vayetze. Yaakov won't go back to see Esav until Yosef is born. The only one who can fight against Yosef, right? The Beis Yaakov is Leish, and Yosef is Lahava, right? Esav is this straw. What's the mashal the Medrash brings? Rashi brings on the Torah, like somebody's coming down the street with a big bundle of flax on the camel or the donkey, and they're afraid who's going to get rid of this? It's going to smash everything in the marketplace. Some clever guy comes along with a little bit of a lahava, a bit of a spark, and the whole thing burns. You know, by that it's an almost identical mashal to the Mishnah in Bava Kama talks about a camel coming down Totten with pishton, right, coming down with flax. And the shaila is that if the candle is outside and burns it, then the Baal HaChalos is chayav. If the candle is inside and it gets burnt, it's the same mashal. And if it's Neres Chanukah, Rabbi says, then you're potter. I think it's the only Mishnah in Shas that mentions Neres Chanukah. We don't have Hilchas Chanukah mentioned Mishnah in Shas. You have the Tkuf of Chanukah mentioned a few different times and things like that, but only Agav the Halachos. As far as I know, that might only be the only reference to Neres Chanukah. But either way, that's not a coincidental mashal. In other words, what it means is that Yosef is the only power within Klal Yisrael to get rid of Golus Edom. So on the one hand, Yosef is a dangerous force within Yisrael. It can lead to force within us that can be misyavnim, can be Golus Edom, used wrongly, can be Egel Azavs. But without the correct use of the koach of Yosef, there is no possibility of ever dealing with Golus Edom. So that's a beautiful thing. You know, whenever you see something that you can't live without, but it's dangerous to live with, then you know we're walking the pathway of Torah. Right? That Torah is not about the easy, it's about getting things right, precise. There's no simple, this. It's always about very subtle things. Midas that by themselves can go wrong, midas out of balance that can go wrong, but in balance they're masakin. That's better what's going on. So it turns out, in other words, I'm jumping a little bit, but you see, what's that, sorry?
The Zoom is recording.
Okay, fine. Okay, good. So if you want to tell me I've got to stop time-wise or you've heard all this before, but
Yes. Okay, good.
What's that?
Just cutting it.
Fine. You see many ramas to that. The birkas shamayim al birkas, all these birkas toim, all this stuff is the bracha of Yosef. The Gemara Tana says the malach that's Machshava shamayim va'aretz Ridya is in the tzur of an egel is also. You'll always see this backwards and forwards. That the chib of shamayim va'aretz is Yosef. This is something we're always going to see. Yosef is a Machshava. Yosef is that which attaches. And when you attach to that which is outside Yisrael, when you bring Shamayim and attach it to ours, there's always a risk. There's always a risk. Yosef is relationship, and relationship is always a risk. Relationship with anything outside of us always has a risk. But you cannot bring the world to tikkun without Yosef. You can't rival the power of Edom without Yosef. Nobody else can build a Malchus in Mitzrayim but Yosef. No one else can build a Malchus Mashiach ben Yosef. This is what you need, right? This is what we always need. It's Yeshua ben Nun, the Matter Ephraim, who can bring us into Eretz Yisrael. It's always that koach that you need. Mishkan Shiloh, before you can have a Beis Hamikdash, and so on. So what is the correct tikkun? What is the koach that allows Yosef to work well, and without which it fails? It turns out it is Shevet Levi. I explain to you soon how this works, but it turns out Shevet Levi. How do we know? Well, first from the Chanukah story, when the whole issue is that we've got a weakening of Yisrael that could be Yosef gone wrong. We know that Shevet Levi is the tikkun in the Chanukah story. We also know that Levi are the ones who almost kill Yosef. But later on in Torah, are Masakin to get things right. And the story of Chanukah and the Chashmonaim, the Medrash Rabbi tells us that in order to succeed against Yavon, you have to have Shevet Levi. That's what Chashmonaim are, right? We have it also in Beis Bracha, Mchatz Masnaim. Rashi brings it there. Moshe gives a special bracha of what they're going to do. In fact, it's Levi who fight against the Egel Azav. So when Levi fights against the Egel Azav, they fight against Yosef gone wrong. In Bereshis, they get it wrong and they fight against Yosef gone right. But by the end, later on in Torah, we find there was a mokum for them Melchama against Yosef. There was a place in the Egel Azav. If Levi works correctly, the midah of Shevet, let's put it in anatomy, the midah of Shevet Levi works well, and you've got it embedded, then Yosef will always do good things. If you don't have the midah of Shevet Levi, then your Yosef will go and do bad things. So what is this? What is the midah of Shevet Levi? It's a midah called kanos, right? On the one hand, we talk about shalom. Having with midah shel Aaron, I have shalom, right? Have shalom over Sabrius Makarvan the Torah, right? Hillel's Mishnah. Well, first of the 7-8 Mishnahs in Ovis, 7 main Mishnahs of Hillel, right? 3 in the first parak, 4 in the second parak, and then quoted again later on. So I have shalom, right? Have shalom. I have Sabrius the shalom. Brisi shalom is given to Pinchas. Always kahunas about Bris shalom, and yet no shevet there's more violence than Shevet Levi, right? From Mechiras Yosef to Shechem beforehand, then Mechiras Yosef, then later on Egel Azav, then Cosby Zimri. It's always Shevet Levi who are the ones who are busy sitting out there fighting. And there's a very interesting when it comes Dafka to Pinchas, Ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. So if you look at Pinchas himself, there's a very intriguing dichotomy, not dichotomy, dilemma, because the Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us that we're not sure whether Pinchas did the right thing or wrong thing. Again, we're feeling this, just like Yosef could go right or wrong, so could Levi go right or wrong, so could Pinchas go right or wrong. These are the same kind of, you can do it right, do it wrong. You do it right, it all works. You do it wrong, it all fails. Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. So why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu say Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen? So what does Rashi say? Because the Shvatim was saying what about him? They've been right, that he comes from Yisrael. He was a bit of a religious fanatic. Tried out this, tried out that. Came to Yiddishkeit. He's also a bit of a religious fanatic. That's what he is. Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. He goes back to Oyev Shalom Broidev Shalom. And the Gemara tells us, Klal Yisrael weren't sure. They were quite upset. He's done, what he's done. The Malachim weren't sure. They wanted to be machram him. So, and everyone's not sure. Halacha ve'ein morin came, right? So halacha, you can't teach us halacha. And the Zohar, they quote B'Shem the Zohar the following lashon: "In kanas below chimu." The reason it's halacha ve'ein morin came. So halacha, how can it be halacha and ein morin came? You have a few times in Shas the concept. What a strange. If it's halacha, teach it. If it's not halacha, don't teach it. Halacha ve'ein morin came usually means as follows: that it's easy to get it wrong. So don't teach it. It's a sort of thing which you have to know from within yourself. In the case of violence, right? Violence is the most dangerous thing when it's mutter, because it's so easy to come from the wrong place. In Hebrew, Lashon HaKodesh, the word kanos can be kin or jealousy. It could be the Lashon ken of a nesting, nurturing, caring. It could be the kanos of zealousness in the positive of thing. It can be a kanos of a fanatic, like the cat that was there by Sheni, who were anti the Rabbanim, right? It can be all these things, right? It's all the sense of relationship of nurturing and caring mitzad echad and controlling mitzad sheni are rooted in exactly the same word in Lashon HaKodesh. The difference is where it's coming from, bifnim. The Zohar is telling us that if it comes from love, it'll be the good thing, and if it comes from anger, it'll be a bad thing. It's not per se the action that's going to work here. It depends where it's coming from. Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. This is not a one impulsive act by some fanatic who couldn't see their worldview being shattered. This is coming from a 3-generational, day in, day out, for decades and decades of work in a deep avodah of shalom that prepared for this moment. Bichlal, if you look at Parashat Pinchas, you see that's the Yesod. Right? It's very interesting. Why is the Musafim in Parashat Pinchas? Why are they not in Vayikra, where they belong? Or at least in Emor, Vayikra Tzavo Emor. Well, what do they do? Why do we need a critical part of Carbonus for the middle of Bamidbar? Well, what are we doing? So I heard the beautifully said once, which is this concept. Rav Weinberg said a beautiful thing, that Be'etzem, Everything in Parashat Pinchas is about people rising to occasions, but it's only able to do so because of their decades of work that's gone in. And the Musafim are this way. Musafim are how do you rise to an occasion, but they're all taught Olas, Shabbos, B'Shabbat, Olas HaPamid B'Niska, right? It's always out Olas HaPamid B'Niska, right? The Tmidim consider Musafim Gil Chosam, as we say in the Musaf. When we have Musaf, we always say Tmidim consider Musafim Gil Chosam. You can't bring a Musaf, you can't rise to an occasion if you don't have the Korban Tamid, the day in, day out work. The only time Shas Yesh Kohen Olam B'Shar Achas is a person who gives up their own life. There's no other way. You can't suddenly do something incredible you can't suddenly do something incredible that requires a very difficult dilemma if you haven't spent years or decades. But no selafchad. Our father didn't die through chait. Let's say he did. What's it got to do with your time over? No, if we're a bunch of radical feminists just coming along to shake the world up, I understand you wouldn't listen to us, but we're coming with an Avas Oretz. We're coming with Avas Hashem. That we're not coming from. We didn't lose our father because he was some kind of radical. It's relevant to know who we've been for the last 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. You have to understand who we are that we're now pushing for something over here. There's a time when we ignore pedigree, lineage, it's irrelevant. But there's a time we're saying, do you understand that we have this multi-generational working on one midah and now we're moving the other way because you understand that we're not just a bunch of radicals and fanatics? This is what's going on. So Parshas Pinchas. The mice of Pinchas are left in a previous parsha, in Parshas Balak. But Asher Knesset Gedolah, when the split in the Sedras, here we go. Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. This is 3 generations of caring about nothing but Shalom. Just went into this act over here. That's what he did. Lochein, that's why he gets the Brisi Shalom. He didn't do this because he loved doing this. He didn't do it because he had his fists in the air thumping and going, raw. He did this out of pain. This hurt him. But it was his love for Ma'aseh Bereishis HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of his creations, for everything. He had no other choice. How can you do it when the whole universe is being destroyed, when Kavod Torah, Kavod Moshe Rabbeinu is being wrecked in front of him? His love is like a parent who has to punish a child. If a parent's angry, the punishment will be wrong. If they love the child and are doing it out of love, the punishment will be right. There's a time you need these things. Shevet Levi works when it's powered by Ohev Shalom, V'Rodev Shalom. Yaakov Avinu tells them off when they don't do that. When they do that, the Netziv says it in Parashat Ki Sisa on why does Moshe Rabbeinu use the lashon of take the sword in after the Egel and kill Es Achiv, your brother. Is that literal? Is it non-literal? Is it because then you mamish can't do it out of any fanaticism or anger, right? Instead, there's a time when the situation demands. But that's what he says. So this is the point of what Shevet Levi is telling you. Therefore, is Shevet Levi works, and the kanos of what becomes the Hashmonaim work, not when it's motivated out of a sense of control, power. I want the world to be this way. People who are trying to control are always outcome oriented. People who care are input oriented. This is the right thing to do if you love Hashem and His world, whether it will lead to good outcome or not. Controllers are very output oriented. I want the world to look a certain way. Therefore, I'm going to do this action. I'll tell you an Afkamina. If you know you've got no chance of it succeeding. Yosef HaTzadik, if you look at him very carefully, has the Midah Levi. Yosef HaTzadik never looks at situations, with one exception, and tries to push an output. If you look very carefully at Yosef, you'll see this all the way through. Right? What does he do? In every situation, he tries to do the right thing. He did some right, his motivation, it's a disaster. Right? He sits there. Think about this. I'll tell you an amazing thing. If you look at the Pasuk, last week's Sedra, when it comes to Eishes Potiphar trying to seduce him. So, right? So listen to the lashon that he says to her, right? She says like this, Vayimo'in, right? So he refuses. Vayomer Eishes Adonav. He says to, now think about the situation as Yosef over. He's a little 17-year-old boy who's basically been kicked out by his family. As far as he's concerned, he's been written out of history forever. As far as he's concerned, his own father may well be on the deal. Told him to go there. Next thing he knows, he's being sold and whatever. He's got every reason in the world. He's being physically seduced. He's being spiritually. He's got a Ruach HaKodesh, the Nevuah, that through her, eventually he's going to have a child. He's got everything. Vayimoin, and he refused. Listen, he said to the wife of his master, Hey, my master does not know what's in the house. He's trusting me with everything, Biyadi. Einenu gadol b'bayis hazeh mimeni, v'lo yichasach mimeni me'uma ki im oisach b'asher at ishto. The only thing he's left is you. How can I do this terrible thing and sin to God? That's a very nice speech. Why didn't he just sum it up with the last two words? It's part of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach Harayos. Why did he need the whole long speech before? So you could say, speculatively, that the Yetzirah was so overpowering, right, that the Gemara tells he was digging his nails into a wall or into maybe a chelik of his guf, or what he's digging in, and he was on the verge of the chait. It might have been overpowering, just if it's 7 minutes, but he can't betray the trust of his master. Yosef can't be disloyal. That's who he is. In every relationship he engages with, he's totally, utterly loyal. It doesn't matter what other interest there is, what other power there is, what spiritual power there is. Yosef, who's got all this chen and all this yofi, never uses chen and yofi to manipulate anybody. It's always to care deeply about the other person. That actually becomes his chen and his yofi. Yosef's integrity, his emeskite, which is Yerush from Yaakov Avinu, is that in every situation, it's never about what you can get out of the situation. It's about what's the right thing in this situation. You'll see the Medrash that says that he could speak to every single person who came in their own lashon. Not every single person has their own lashon, but they do. They do. There's such a thing as an individual lashon. Yosef can speak to everybody. He can listen to you and know what your language is. He says again and again in Chazal. Yosef does not manipulate anybody. He tells the brothers, Kainam Matam, you're manipulators. But if you are Kainam Matam, sorry, he says Meraglim Matam. The Meragl is the ultimate manipulative relationship, right? You get close to somebody, pretend to be somebody else, right? So if you want to be honest people, here's what you do. I want to see your brother. If Yosef were, yes, he's got the koyach to manipulate people. He's got a relationship skill there that could, but he never used it. He will never. What actually makes him special is his total na'amanos. Tzadik b'emunaso yichya. Yosef is called Yosef HaTzadik. Tzadik b'emunaso. He lives with na'amanos. If you look at Mesilas Yesharim, when Mesilas Yesharim talks about emunah, he doesn't talk about emunah kapei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He reinterprets all the psukim and chazals on emunah to mean na'amanos in relationships, specifically financial in those cases. It's always na'amanos. It's always being na'aman. Yosef is totally na'aman, which is why the one time that he does try to ask something from a relationship, he gets punished with 2 more years in prison. What was wrong? The famous way he does shishtadlus. Yeah, but you can't do that, Yosef. That's not who you are. Yeah, you can't. You're dangerous if you do these things. So Yosef is never pushing things. In every situation, he sees people looking sad. He goes up to them, wants to know what they're doing. Everybody loves him. He becomes Ish Matzliach by never trying to. When you got the koyach of Yosef, it's about caring for each relationship as far as what that relationship needs. That's what Levi gets right. When Levi gets it right, Yosef had that within him. The brothers didn't realize they had that within him. And they just saw the potential for it to go wrong, be manipulative in the sense of controlling, in the sense of self-serving, in the sense of avodah zarah. And then it becomes Yavan, it becomes Egel Azav, it becomes everything that's disastrous. But Yosef done right becomes indispensable. That's what they missed within Yosef. Now, why is that relation to Chanukah? Because that is actually the Yesod of what Chanukah is. If you think deeply about Chanukah, you think that everything that the Misyavnim or Yavonim tried to destroy within Klal Yisrael was about the nature of the relationship we have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as shutfim with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of people who's doing the right thing as Masak in the world. I'll explain what I mean. Why they pick Milah and Shabbos? So Milah and Shabbos are very obvious things to attack, but why Kiddush HaChodesh? And why Torah Shabbat Peh? If you look at the things they're attacking hard, there's lots of other things get done here and there by locals, and they attack the Beis HaMikdash itself, obviously. But Shabbos and Milah are very obvious mitzvahs. But you'd have thought they'd go for kashrus. They made them be makruv for all sorts of famous tomatoes. Why not make them eat them? Right? You'd have thought they'd go for Taras HaMishpach. You'd have thought they'd go for Bate Knisios. There were Bate Knisios in Ba'ashim. You'd have thought they'd go for, I don't know, all sorts of things. Tefillin, mezuzah, so many things they could go for. All the Moyadim. Why do they pick these specific ones? What's Kiddush HaChodesh supposed to achieve? That you don't use Eidei Re'iyah, you don't use now witnesses to determine the calendar. Well, what are they trying to achieve with all that? That we use a luach? So, well, that makes life easier for us. You know, it was like to try and keep a Jewish calendar before there was a Luach. He didn't know which day of a month Pesach's going to, he didn't know which month Pesach's going to land. Imagine trying to prepare holidays, family holidays, chasnas. You don't know when everything's going to be. You know, so now it's simple. We use a Luach. We had the Messiah of the date of the orbit of the moon, and they had one anyway. I mean, you know, this was like why do they do that? What are they doing? So the Torah says all of these four are simonim of the shutfus, that it's not pshat that we do mitzvahs, we get a reward. It's pshat that when we do mitzvahs, we care about HaKadosh Baruch Hu's world and we shutfim and bring it to tikkun. We're doing midas Yosef in the world, al pi midas Levi. We are caring about the world. We're being Machshava shamayim to aretz. We're being Machshava the Yisrael who can sit, you know, growing Torah and then actually doing some tikkun out there. Bris Milah, right? The famous Tanchuma. Turnus Rufus Arosh against Rabbi Akiva. What's greater than the work about Kadosh Baruch Hu, the work of us? That, you know, and then it turns out to an argument about Bris Milah. Rabbi Akiva famously takes out wheat and says, this is the Ma'aseh Hashem, and takes out bread or a cake and says, this is what humans produce. And you have it elsewhere, you have the Gemara Baba Basra that says Turnus Rufus, right? And that turns out to be an argument about Milah. Rufus says, why would a Kadosh Baruch Hu want Esalech Levonav Etomim to become pure by Bris Milah? Make us Bris Milah, that's so perfect. Right, you have the same thing in Gemara Baba Basra, Daf Yud, where Turnus Rufus says to Rabbi Akiva, if what there's aniyim, HaKadosh Baruch made them poor, why are you giving stock and making them rich? You want them to have money, you're giving them money. What's that?
Yosef's not born Mahal.
Yosef's not born Mahal.
He is born Mahal.
Yes, Yosef is born Mahal. Yosef is better because Bris Milah told him Mitzrayim. You're right, right? That's Yosef is deeply linked to the concept of Milah. So, right, in those who quote from Opinimius to say that that's actually the chelik, the spiritual, the parallel in the physical body to the mid of Yosef is the Bris Milah. So very good ha'ara. But the point is this, is that what are they saying? What's Turnus Rufus saying in all these? He's saying Yavani ideology, that the universe doesn't care about being changed. The universe is in its natural best form. Aristotle's model of a prime mover who doesn't get involved in the world, doesn't care less, doesn't know, is not aware, doesn't matter, right? The natural order, the power structures. To Yovan, by the way, philosophically, if you ever want to learn Sfarim like Moran Avuchim, or even the Kuzari in the beginning and try and understand what the philosophers saying, they believe the laws of nature are immutable. They're ba'atzem immutable. The power structures the natures give can't be changed and never should be tampered with. You study, those who are powerful are meant to be powerful. It ran up and down Greek thinking and Roman thinking in so many different ways, right? The games are celebrating the physical power of the human being. The Alexander the Great is considered divine when he hits the gates of India. This is what it is. Power is a natural part of the order of things. There's powerful and powerless, and so on. And so Yavon looked at the world that way. That's how they looked at the world. This idea that you're massacring the human body, or that you're going to change the nature of the human, or that you're going to change the nature of reality, that's an anathema, it's a violation. They loved the beauty of the natural world. That's why they studied it so much. They wanted to understand it, maybe manipulate it, but ultimately to see its beauty and its art form. Which is the body that can run, wrestle, throw a javelin the best? Let's put a wreath on its naked physical form. And you come along and mutilate it with Bris Milah. And Rabbi Akiva says to Turnus Rufus, Kadosh Baruch Hu created an incomplete world. He created great wheat. What an unbelievable bria of wheat. Wow. Where would we be without wheat? Could we have had the Neolithic revolution without wheat? Could we have had the beginning of farming and cultivation and sedentary populations and city-states and empires without wheat? No. But wheat's not a finished product. You just eat wheat, you'd be dead pretty quickly. Your teeth would be ground. What would you do with that thing? You have to take the raw material that could be perfect, but isn't, grind it, work it, knead it, put water, put fire, put all these things into it, right? And only then can it be something that can enrich and build civilization. But not in its raw form. The human male body is a raw form. It's got incredible potential, but in its current form, it's a disaster. Unmasukan, it's a disaster. That's what he's saying. The economics, natural structure of humanity, it's got a lot of potential, but in its current form, it's a disaster. That's what we're saying. And we have a vision that the world's going to be different and run under different laws called Olam Haba. We learn together Olam Haba. same laws that evolve, different laws. It's going to be different. Emergent out of our history, the end chapter of history will be a radically different set of laws, a different social order, different spiritual, different everything. We'll experience things in a radically different way. Can you imagine telling that to Yovan? That history, the way you look at it now, is actually wrong, and we're going to change it and rebuild civilization. That going out to war doesn't make you great. That Gar's Avim Kavas, that we're going to have peace, that's going to be the ultimate state. Alexander the Great, you're going to withdraw back to Macedonia and give everybody, that's the ultimate state of reality. The guy who can wrestle really well isn't the great hero of things, and his power over somebody else is an anathema. Every time we keep Shabbos, we say we're going Me'ein Olam Haba. We're traveling to a world this world is not the world we belong to, as we've been learning together. This world is wrong, it's raw, it's incomplete, it's got potential, but it's not there. Our world, Yavon, is different to the one that you dominate and you have power over. Our world to say all of this is bad. Human oppression, all this stuff. We're going to build the world where Malar is Be'as Hashem, where the Kodesh Baruch Hu, everyone is kind of come up with Selam Alakim, where there's going to be Garas Avim Kevis, where there's going to be Loisa Goy Goy Cherev, Lo Yibudu Oid Nechama. This is the world, not your world, a world where every action of the human being actually matters, because we can actually build that world, where the laws of nature are immutable only in one sense, but they actually carry the potential to be radically different, and we can make that tikkun happen. We aren't here to be part of a system that doesn't care what we do. We're part of a system that cares deeply what we do, and therefore we can change everything. Where if we care for it and we nurture it and we build it, it will change to perfection. We can't push that outcome, but we can push the inputs. That's the Shevet Levi Midas Yosef. That's what Yovan didn't like within us. Kiddush HaChodesh, same thing. The calendar is not determined. It requires human choices and inputs. It's a shutfus. The calendar, you might like the calendric orbits and study them as much as you want, Yovan, and decide whether 9 or 5 or 4, Ptolemaic universe or some other version. That's missing the point. Time is not perfectly determined. The calendar isn't perfect. The lunar is not 29 or 30 days precisely. It needs us to decide. It needs the Sanhedrin to decide if we're going to have an next 13th month or not. It is built not perfectly, and it requires shutfus. It requires our input to generate time, to generate dates, to generate the kedusha that comes with it. It's our caring and partnership with the world. That's what, and Tosha Bal Peh. Tosha Bal Peh, Yavon, at least at times it seems, could cope with the Tosha B'chsav, a divine law. But a concept of Tosha Bal Peh, you can make drashas and they become Torah. And you can argue over which drasha and then vote on it, and then the Einei Ha'ida, the Chachmei Yisrael, the Krivea, Adin Doiraisa. The Kedusha Kesef becomes Doiraisa. The point where we're stuck with the Gemara, Gim Rabbon and Kedusha Minei, how does it? It's a Din Doiraisa, Min HaTorah. How do you get that? Because the Drasha Chazal, etc. Yeah, how do you do that? Because there is the Takanas also. How do you do these things? You make divine law to the point where Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanas will bring Kol Tshuva Sheva Olam, the one who's Kafmoi's Naim, Machria, everybody, brings you all the Tshuva Sheva Olam, and the Baskol comes up and says, Malacham Rabbi Eliezer, Shalachaka Moiseh B'chol Makom. What are you doing arguing against Rabbi Eliezer? The halach was always with him. And Rabbi Yeshua can say, it's Lo Bashamayim. So you're sitting in the Beis Medrash creating God's law. That's the point. That we're shutfim. We're not passive observers in this world, waiting to end up in an afterlife and get some points. What we're doing is being Masaka in the world. What we're doing is becoming a shutf in the whole of Ma'aser Bereishis, including the application of Torah, including the calendar, and that they couldn't deal with. In other words, and this is if you think now deeply, when the Hashmonaim went to war, they didn't go to war because they thought they would win. This story is Giborim Biad Chaloshim, Rabbim Ba'ad Ma'atim, Tmeim Biad Tahir, Rishon Biad Tzadikim. This was not a situation where Klal Yisrael thought they'd win. The mistake of Bar Kochba and others is they went to battle thinking they'll win. People learn the wrong lesson from Chanukah down in history. They learn if you go out to war, Kodesh Baruch will always make you win. Hashmonaim didn't go to war to win. They'd be Moshe and Afish. They thought they'd lose. They didn't think they'd win. So why do they do it? Because, and I forget who says this, but somebody great says it. Ravtas Rivom, Dantas Dina, Mekantas Nikmasom. Right? What do you think about those words? Are they accurate? In Purim they are. Right? You fought for Klal Yisrael. In Purim, we were in danger. There was a Gezeirah, Hashim Dahari Rabbi, Kol HaYehudim, Nabad, Zokitaf, everybody. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu fought for us. In Chanukah, was there any danger against us? We weren't in danger. They should say Ravtas Rivcha or Ravnas Rivcha, right? We fought your fights. We did your battle, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You did your battle. What does it mean? It says a shvach. I forget who says one of the Hasidic rabbis, beautiful things, that it's a shvach HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a shvach for Yisrael as well. We cared so much about you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the world where Torah Ashkichem Torah Secha Lavirim B'Chukei V'Tzeinecha, a world which said Kisva L'Chama Karen Ashar Einon Chelek V'Elokei Yisrael, we have no portion, is a world where we don't exist. As we learned last week, Yisrael was created for its relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You take that away and we don't exist. We have no choice but to be Moshe Nefesh for this. We have no choice when we're seeing somebody being killed for Chilul Shabbos but to stand forward. You're going to lose, it doesn't matter. What are you going to do? Stand there and watch it happen? It might fail. Zimri could shoot an arrow back and have a right to kill you as a roidef. It might go wrong. I'm not in this because it's right, because I know the outcome it's going to generate. I'm not some messianist who's going to do something now and have Moshiach sitting there 5 minutes later. I don't know. But I'm doing the right thing right now. I don't know, says Yosef Atzadik, if talking to a butler and a baker is going to go, I'm not going to do it because I've got some cheshbon. Afterwards, he thinks of a cheshbon. He shouldn't have done even that. There's an input right now. This guy is crying. He needs me. There's an input right now. The world's in I need me to do something. I don't know if it'll work or fail. That's not my issue. My issue, I care about my Hashem. I got to do the right thing now. That was what Yosef had. The mid of Levi within him. And that made his relationships be a world of tikkun. And a Chanami giving bris milah to all of Mitzrayim, and so on. Much more to say. But that's the Nakudah in a very deep way of what they were fighting for. And then nobody lit the menorah thinking that it's going to stay alight for 8 days. They lit Pashtus, they took this Pach Shemesh, according to Iltus, couldn't even burn 1 day. They lit it, and when it would run out, Tumuhuchu B'Tzibah, they'd probably bring Tomei oil and light it for the rest of the time. They didn't have a Havamina that's going to stay alight. That's not why they lit it. They lit it anyway because the right thing to do, take what little bit we have and do something good with it. We've got a bit of pure, let's light it. Kodesh Baruch Hu says, I'm going to make that one. The menorah, and the menorah Ba'etzim symbolizes this. The Medrash Ba'al Yisra says, Aaron, this is it, that I want your aura, not mine. Kodesh Baruch Hu could bring aura into the you walk into the Beis HaMikdash for 1 minute a day to be Maktik Torahs. What do you need a menorah for? Just leave the door open. What do you need a menorah for? Come in with a torch. The Medrash says, I want to see your aura. I want to see you bring Maktik the aura. This is the oimek of this. Those who know will know the remez of the Aragonos and Ma'aser Bereshis, how the Bnei Sasa brings this point that the Lamed Vav Shoy, so 36 hours the Adam Rishon at the Ar, that it's always that Lamed Vav Tzadikim, and in Chanukah when we're Mahadrim and Mahadrim we end up lighting Lamed Vav Neiros. But the shirish of that is that that's what the Nakuda is. That Yosef is, yes, if Yosef becomes manipulative about controlling end games, when you try to carry and go out into the wider world, when you start to look at how and you're trying to control end games, you're dangerous. When you're Chen and Yofi, it's dangerous. The mid of Yosef Atzadik, the mid of Yesod, is that when everything we do is out of a care of my separation, everything we do is a care of what does this moment demand of me right now, then without Yosef, you can't be Masak in the world. With Yosef, you can get rid of Goddess Yob and Goddess Edom and so on. So this gives a sort of a heck of some of the sugyas that are Ger to Chanukah, and some of the avodah Hashem that comes in, and some of the avodah that we've got to be doing in the Goddess, that really speaking, we have to see ourselves as shutfim with HaKadosh Baruch Hu Masak in the world. But the mahalach of doing it is in every situation do the right thing, even if it can lead to totally disastrous consequences. Right? If you care about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you care deeply about the world, what does the situation need of me right now? It needs me to spend a lot of time with this person. It needs me to make a fool of myself. It needs me to do whatever it needs. That's what I got to do in the world. And ultimately, those things are Masak in the entire world. I don't need to know how. This goes back to other discussions we've had. I don't need to understand the Mahalach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I need to understand that we aren't here to accept the way the world is. We aren't here to let the power structure of the world run the world. We aren't here. And when we're Masakin, then Yavan has a place too. But until we're Masakin, Yavan is a dangerous force. There's a lot more to say. Hopefully, I brought a few sugyas together that can at least give us some kind of perspective on what Chanukah's Megala within us and within the world. And therefore, and that's there's you have heard Reb Lachman's share about Megillas Tanis on Chanukah, and understand that's also it's all the same point. It's that we stand there and we try it. It's our hishtadlus. This is what hishtadlus really is. It's that I'm doing the right thing right now. Hishtadlus is not I see a plan down there, I'm going to do it. Hishtadlus is I do the right step right now. Even if it's crazy, even if it's moistenavish, even if it doesn't matter. This is it. That is misaking the world. Kosh Baruch should help us misaking the world. That should be safe. What's that? Yeah. That's true. That's true. Okay, but